Before we dive into tonight's stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel grow and lets the algorithm know you enjoy this type of storytelling. I've always been a night owl. I don't really know why, I just can't ever seem to fall asleep when I'm supposed to. Even as a kid, I'd stay up reading or just wandering around the house. I grew up on a small farm in East Texas, kind of isolated, maybe 20 minutes outside of town, surrounded by pasture and tree lines that always looked way too dark at night. On nights when the moon was bright enough, I used to take walks out there to clear my head. The animals were used to me wandering around, and I always felt safe, like the land belonged to us and nothing bad could happen there. This one night, though, I couldn't shake this restless feeling. It must have been close to midnight when I finally gave up trying to sleep. I pulled on some jeans and my old work boots, grabbed a jacket, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was still warm, but there was a breeze that made the wind chimes rattle a little. The moonlight was bright enough that I didn't need a flashlight. I was just about to head down toward the fence when I noticed something move near the barn. At first, I thought it was one of the goats, or maybe the donkey. But then I realized it was a person. A man. He was walking out from behind the barn, carrying something long and heavy. The sound of the door creaking behind me must have caught his attention, because he turned and started walking toward me. Even in that pale light, I could tell he was holding a gun. For a few seconds, I just froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Then instinct kicked in, and I backed up fast, nearly tripping over the step as I got back inside and slammed the door. I locked it, threw the deadbolt, and ran to my parents' room, yelling that there was a man with a gun in the yard. My dad shot up instantly. He didn't even question it. He grabbed his shotgun from the corner, told my mom to call the sheriff, and told me to stay close behind him. Out here, help doesn't come quick. We knew it would be at least 20 minutes before any deputy could reach us. My dad didn't want to just sit around waiting, especially if someone was near the animals. So we went back outside together. The moment we stepped out, I noticed how quiet it was. None of the usual noises, no crickets, no rustling from the goats, not even the donkey braying, just silence. We walked toward the barn with our flashlights sweeping across the grass. Inside the barn, every stall was empty. The goats were gone, the chickens were gone. Even my old cat Velcro wasn't around. They all slept close to the barn every night, so whatever had been out here had scared them off. We did a quick check of the area and found that someone had tried to pry open the tool shed door next to the barn. The wood around the lock was splintered, but not broken through. Other than that, nothing seemed touched. We searched behind the barn, the fence line, even the feed storage, but we couldn't find a single sign of the guy. My dad figured he must have run off when he realized we were armed, so we just waited for the police. My dad had a little fridge in the barn he used for drinks and snacks when he was working. It had one of those padlocks on it to keep us kids out when we were younger. He unlocked it and handed me a beer, then grabbed one for himself. We leaned against the chicken coop wall and waited under the buzzing fluorescent light that hung from the rafters. Every few minutes, he'd look out toward the pasture or check behind the barn again, but nothing ever moved. When the cops finally showed up, they looked around with their flashlights, found the footprints in the dirt and the cracked doorframe, but that was about it. They told us it was probably just some drifter, or maybe a thief who got scared off once he saw someone was home. They wrote a report, promised to patrol the road for a bit, and left. After they were gone, my dad and I finished our beers and talked for a few minutes about maybe putting up motion lights or cameras. It felt like everything was fine. Eventually, we went back inside and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to my dad calling me out back. I could tell by his voice something was wrong. When I got out there, he was standing in front of the chicken coop. The door was open, and he wasn't moving. I asked him what was wrong, and he just told me to stay where I was. But of course I didn't. I walked closer, and when I looked inside, I saw what he was looking at. Every one of our chickens was dead, feathers everywhere, blood on the floorboards. It wasn't just a fox or raccoon. This was deliberate. Their necks had been twisted or broken. My stomach turned. That's when it hit us. The guy hadn't left. He'd been hiding inside the chicken coop the entire time we were leaning against it, drinking our beers and talking about how lucky we were that he was gone. The coop was big enough for a person to hide in if they crouched low behind the nesting boxes. We never thought to check in there. We were literally standing with our backs against the wall while he was on the other side of it, and the more I thought about it, the worse it got. The smell of blood must have been in the air while we were sitting there. We just hadn't noticed it yet. He must have been killing the chickens while we were right there, trying to keep them quiet. We called the sheriff again, and they came back out. They found boot prints inside the coop matching the ones from the night before, along with some bits of wire from the lock he'd pried off to get in. They figured he'd tried to leave after we went back inside, but couldn't find a way off the property without running into us again. There were a few places on the fence where the barbed wire had been pulled, but it looked like he'd given up and just disappeared into the woods before dawn. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every time the house creaked, every time a dog barked in the distance, I'd jolt awake thinking someone was outside again. I stopped taking walks at night completely. Even now, years later, when I think about it, the part that still makes my skin crawl isn't the man himself. It's how close we were to him that night without even realizing it. We were laughing, drinking, leaning against that coop while he was just a few feet away, probably watching us through the cracks in the wood, holding that gun, deciding what to do next. I've worked security for years now, mostly in high-rises around downtown Vancouver. It's a quiet enough job most of the time. You deal with alarms, lost key cards, the occasional drunk who forgets which building is his. But every now and then, something happens that sticks with you. Something that doesn't really make sense, no matter how many times you go over it in your head. There are 2 nights like that I still think about. The first one happened a few years back when I was guarding the HSBC building. It was a normal afternoon, pretty slow, until a call came in from one of the higher floors. A lawyer was having a heart attack in his office. I grabbed the AED, called for paramedics, and took the elevator up. When I got there, a group of office workers were crowded around this guy lying on the carpet, gasping for air. Mid-50s, suit still half on, tie loosened, face pale and drenched in sweat. His co-workers looked terrified, but no one knew what to do. I told them to step back, drop to my knees, and tried to keep him calm while I got the AED ready. He was clutching his chest and saying it hurt, that he couldn't breathe. I told him to hang on, that help was already on the way. He kept talking though, like he couldn't stop himself, saying he didn't want to die, that he didn't have a will, that he needed to call his ex-wife. His voice cracked halfway through it, like he already knew it was too late. The paramedics got there a couple minutes later and moved in fast. I stepped aside, but stayed close, just in case they needed me. They hooked him up to their gear, started giving orders to each other, and I started writing down times for the report. Then something changed. He looked up, not at anyone, just straight past them, like he saw something behind the medics. His eyes went wide. The color drained out of his face completely. He started shaking his head and pushing himself back with his heels like he was trying to get away from something. The medics had to hold him still. He shouted that he didn't believe it and kept saying no over and over, and then made this sound, a long, low sigh, and went limp. The flatline came right after. They worked on him for a long time, but he flatlined, I've seen a lot of people scared before, but I've never seen someone look that way. It wasn't panic or confusion, it was recognition. Like he saw something he knew. I told myself it was just the lack of oxygen, maybe a hallucination from the stress. But even now, when I think about his face in those last seconds, I know it wasn't pain that killed him. It was fear. The second one happened years later, in a different tower, just a few blocks away. A newer place built where one of the old office buildings used to stand. That one's mostly condos now, full of wealthy residents who complain if the lobby coffee machine is out of oat milk. It was a Sunday night when this woman came down to the desk looking exhausted. She said she'd moved in a couple days ago and something was wrong with her apartment. I figured it was plumbing or noise from neighbors, but she said it was someone trying to get into her unit. The first night she said she heard banging on the door while unpacking. Not knocking, actual banging, like someone hitting it with their fist. She yelled and it stopped. Later that night, she heard the doorknob turning back and forth. She called the night guard, but nobody was found on the floor. The second night, same thing. Door rattling, loud banging. Nobody there when she opened it. By the time she came down to me, she was on edge. I went up with her to check. Everything looked fine. The hallway, the locks, even the floor cameras. No sign of anyone. I told her maybe the ventilation system was causing pressure changes, or maybe some neighbor was drunk and hitting the wrong door. As I was leaving her apartment, I opened the door to step out and almost collided with an old woman standing right outside. She was so close I could have touched her. I jumped back, and my heart just about stopped. She had thin gray hair, this pale, almost bluish skin, and she didn't move a muscle, just looked between me and the resident. I said, "Can I help you, ma'am?" Her voice was flat when she answered, "No, I'm just waiting for the elevator." And as if on cue, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged. She walked in without another word. I tried to follow, but the doors closed right in my face. I told the tenant to come downstairs with me so we could check the security footage. I honestly thought maybe she was a relative of a previous owner who'd somehow gotten in. We rewound the video and watched the feed from that hallway. And there I was, opening the door, stepping back in surprise. But the hallway was empty. There was no one there. No old woman, no movement, nothing. I played it again and again, trying to catch a flicker or a shadow, but there wasn't anything to see. The woman beside me covered her mouth and said, "You saw her too." And yeah, I did. I saw her standing 3 feet from me, clear as day. After she went back upstairs, I stayed in the control room replaying the clip for almost an hour. I even checked other cameras, in case maybe she'd come from the stairwell or another floor. Nothing. Not a single frame of her anywhere in the building. Later that night, when I walked past that same hallway, I swear the air felt colder. Not the kind of chill from air conditioning, just that feeling you get when you know you're not alone. I went back the next day to check the visitor logs, and the name of the previous tenant on that floor was an elderly woman. She'd lived there before the old building was torn down. The record said she'd passed away years earlier. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe... When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot because of my dad's job in the Navy. Every couple of years, we'd pack up and start over somewhere new along the East Coast, Virginia, Maine, Florida, until he retired when I was 14. But the one place that never left my head was Newport, Rhode Island. That's where something happened that none of us ever really forgot. I must have been around 8 or 9. We were living in one of those standard Navy housing neighborhoods, rows of identical duplexes, the kind where every lawn looked the same, and you could tell which families were military just by the way their cars were parked. Every house looked like it had been copy-pasted from the same blueprint, except for one, the one where my best friend Michael lived. Michael and I were practically glued together. We went to the same elementary school, rode bikes after class, and played outside until the streetlights came on. He was the kind of kid who always had a scraped knee and some wild story about climbing trees or racing down the hill on a skateboard. I practically lived at his place after school, or at least I tried to, because no matter how much time we spent together, he never let me stay the night at his house. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe his parents just didn't like having guests over. But looking back, I realized that every time I asked to sleep over, he'd hesitate a little. He'd change the subject, or say something like, "My mom's weird about it," and we'd go back to whatever game we were playing. The few times I did go inside his house, it always felt off. The air was heavy, kind of stale, like a place that had been shut up too long. Their kitchen had those old yellowish light bulbs that made everything look like it was from a different decade, and even during the day, it never seemed bright in there. Their house was also the only one on the street that hadn't been remodeled, so it had older flooring and creaky stairs. My mom used to say it gave her the creeps, but she never told me why. The last time I ever went inside was a Saturday afternoon. We were sitting in his living room watching Power Rangers while his mom was making grilled cheese sandwiches in the kitchen. It was a normal day, or at least it started that way. She suddenly called out that they were out of cheese and came into the room wiping her hands. She said she'd be right back. She was just running to the next down the road. It was only 5 minutes away. Michael and I didn't move from our chairs. We kept watching TV. I remember the exact episode, one of the ones with Lord Zed, because we were both doing impressions of him and laughing. She was gone maybe 10 minutes, 15 tops. And then she screamed. It wasn't the kind of startled scream you'd make if you dropped something. It was long and sharp and panicked. We both froze. Then, being dumb kids, we started laughing, thinking she'd just scared herself or was playing around. When she didn't stop screaming, we got up and ran toward the kitchen. She was standing there, completely pale, staring at something. Every single cabinet was open. Every drawer was pulled out to the point of almost falling. The refrigerator door was hanging wide open, and the light inside was flickering. The whole kitchen looked like it had been torn apart. She turned to Michael and asked if he did this, but her voice was shaking. We both shook our heads. We hadn't moved from the living room. She didn't say anything else. She just told us to go to my house right now, to finish watching TV there. And as we left, she grabbed the phone with trembling hands. I remember hearing her start crying as she talked, probably calling Michael's dad. When we got to my place, my mom looked surprised to see us. I told her what happened, and she just went quiet. She didn't look shocked, just uneasy, like she already knew something. Then she said, "You're not going over there anymore." I asked why, and she hesitated before saying, "Michael's mom has been having strange things happen in that house." I asked what she meant, but she just shook her head and told me to drop it. Later that night, after Michael went home, she finally told me a few things that Michael's mom had apparently shared. The first story happened a couple of months earlier. Michael had pneumonia and was bedridden. His dad was at work, and his mom was cleaning downstairs when she heard his bedroom door slam. She went upstairs, thinking he'd gotten up. But when she opened the door, he was out cold, exactly where she'd left him. She left the door open and went back downstairs. A few minutes later, it slammed again, harder. She ran up the stairs and tried the door, but it was locked from the inside. She started banging on it, calling Michael's name, no answer. Finally, she threw her shoulder into it and broke it open. Michael was still asleep. His blankets were half off the bed, his closet door wide open, and the air in the room was freezing cold, like someone had just opened a window in winter. She said she stood there for a long time, just staring, trying to understand how the door had locked itself. She didn't even bother closing the closet. She just carried Michael downstairs to sleep on the couch. The second story happened maybe a month after that. Michael was staying at my place for a sleepover, so his mom was home alone. His dad was working an overnight shift. She said she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of the toilet flushing. It was happening so fast, there wasn't even time for the tank to refill. She thought maybe Michael had come home early and was playing around, but when she got out of bed, the sound stopped. She checked the bathroom. Nothing wrong. Everything was dry, no leaks, no running water. She went back to bed. Just as she was about to fall asleep, it started again. She got halfway down the hallway and called out, "Michael?" The sound stopped instantly. She said it was so sudden. The silence was almost louder than the flushing. She waited, then turned around to go back to bed, and that's when she heard the coat closet downstairs slam shut. So hard it rattled the picture frames on the wall. She ran to her bedroom, locked the door, and called base security. When the officers arrived, they had to use their key to get in because she was too scared to open the door. They checked every room, every window, every door, all locked from the inside. No sign of a break-in, but the coat closet was wide open. Coats and shoes were thrown all over the floor like someone had ripped through it in a hurry. After that, she started keeping all the lights on when she was home alone. A few weeks later, they packed up and left. Michael's dad got a transfer to a base in New Jersey, and they were gone almost overnight. The house stayed empty after that. The grass started to grow over the sidewalk, and the windows stayed shut all the time. Maintenance came by once or twice, but nobody ever moved in while we were still there. Every now and then, I'd ride my bike past it on my way to the park and slow down a little, just out of habit. That's how it stayed until we moved a year later. I never saw the Davises again, and I never found out if anyone else ever lived there.